The year was 1886 and France was in a time of change. The traditional Wagner-style classical music was fading out and French Impressionism was rolling in. And France, unfortunately, didn't have much of a musical identity. Camille Saint-Saëns felt he needed to do something about this, that he would need to write something that could help France re-establish itself as musically significant. This is the story of Saint Saens Symphony No. 3. Saint Saëns was born on October 9th, 1835, in Paris, France. Charles Camille Saint-Saëns was a child prodigy on the piano, performing at the age of 10, and gave his first recital in 1846, where he ended his recital offering to play any of Beethoven's sonatas from memory as an encore. He studied the organ and composition at the Paris Conservatory, and in 1855 performed his first symphony, his Symphony No. 1.
Okay.
Saint-Saëns was a professor of piano at the Niedermeyer School from 1861 to 1865, and instructed people such as Gabriel Fauré and Andrew Messager. Saint-Saëns helped form the National Society of Music after the Franco-Prussian War in 1871, which featured significant French orchestral works. Saint-Saëns first traveled to England in 1871, where he played for Queen Victoria and studied Handel's manuscripts in the Buckingham Palace Library. Saint-Saëns became extremely popular in England as a conductor, a pianist, and a composer, and in 1883, the Philharmonic Society of London requested a concerto piece be performed. Charles Camille Saint-Saëns decided to do England one better and write an entire symphony. And what better symphony than his most ambitious one yet, the Organ Symphony. To state how ambitious this symphony would be, it would be in C minor, a minor scale that was used in many great symphonies like Bach's First Symphony as an example of its importance. The symphony would be cast into two movements. The symphony, he wrote, would be difficult, and he noted that one aggravation would be that the piano part would involve one player at first and two later. Saint-Saëns' prominent use of the organ earned his piece the nickname the Organ Symphony, and he conducted the premiere in London. Now, one little side note is that despite it being called the Organ Symphony, it shouldn't really be called that because an organ symphony would mean that it would just be played by the organ alone, but it earned its nickname because of its prominent use of it. Saint-Saëns wrote an analysis of his third symphony, and as I quote him, the symphony is divided into two parts. Nevertheless, it embraces in principle the four traditional movements. But the first is altered in its development to serve as an introduction to the adagio, and the scherzo is connected by the same process to the finale. The composer has sought to avoid, to some extent, the intermediable reprises and repetitions which more and more tending to disappear from instrumental music under the influence of an increasingly developed musical culture. His music was considered a bit old-fashioned for the time, but his Symphony No. 3 is highly original for the time, and innovative in form and thematic development as well as instrumentation. No. 3 was condensed down from the traditional four movements. Symphony No. 3 has a slow introduction that does not last long and is in what we would call a sonata form. This quickly moves directly into a slow movement in D-flat major, and although this sounds technical, even an untrained ear can't miss this, as this is where the organ makes its first entrance into the symphony. The orchestra string section enters in with the organ, and the symphony takes off. In the second half of the Organ Symphony, you hear strings, woodwinds, and piano among a few other instruments. There begins to be a formal repetition, so common to symphonies of this era, but Saint-Saëns breaks into a chaotic mix of strings, and then you enter the organ. And again, to signal a change emphasized with a C major chord, the symphony ends in a glorious, apocalyptic, and bombastic coda, bringing an end to a beautiful symphony. Saint-Saëns died on December 16, 1921 in Algiers, Algeria, at the age of 86. Saint-Saëns would pass away on December 16, 1921 in Algiers, Algeria, at the age of 86. From 1880 till the end of his life, he wrote music that included all areas of dramatic and instrumental music. Saint-Saëns dedicated this symphony to the memory of his friend, Franz Liszt, who died in June of 1886, just a few months before the symphony debuted. And that concludes another episode of Musicology with Rhett Maxwell. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you later.